what's it called?
Which one?
Untold, the orange
Is that
one.
what you're drinking now?
Yeah, the orange one.
Oh, busting out the 8.7 IPAs at 10 in the morning. Look at
It's
you.
not an 8.7, it's a 6.
Well, okay, fine. If you say so. If you say so. Mary's always right.
What?
Yeah. Nah, she's always right. Anyway, yeah, so that's cool. That is cool. Cool, cool, cool. Cool, cool, cool,
All
cool,
right.
cool, cool. All right.
Looks like we're live.
Okay. Can't get my bearings together today. I don't know why. We'll see if it does that thing where I can't let's see.
Live chat. Good morning, everybody who's on here. Don't think there's like all of one person.
It's probably me.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, live. Okay, there we are. There we are. Okay. Yeah.
Realized I
Yeah.
still have my morning, Barbara.
Hey, morning. A nice sunny blah day. I don't know why I said sunny.
Myself.
It's never sunny anymore. It's always cloudy and rainy and crabby. But it's all good. It is all good. Good morning to the folks, the gang, the peeps.
Morning,
It's
Tammy.
just still Easter time, sort of, so we can still say peeps, right?
Say peeps anytime.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, yeah, good to do this again. I took a week off last week as I was traveling to parts unknown.
Yep.
Now I'm back
We
in
might be taking next weekend off too because we are busy both Saturday and Sunday. So I might have to do an evening live at
what are we
some
doing
point.
Sunday?
Going to see friends in Worcester.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. I forgot about that. I'm glad you reminded me. I'm glad about that. So we'll see. We'll have to
Yeah.
pick something. The
And the weekend
nighttime ones
after
aren't
that, and the
too
weekend
bad.
after that, we're going to Canada and we're actually going to go see the Confederate monument that is up in Kincardine, which is about half an hour north of my hometown, Goderich.
Oh dear, there'll be trouble that one. Be trouble
Morning,
the old
Autumn.
Bill.
Autumn said snowing here in Pittsburgh. Morning, Frank. Happy 162nd to Shiloh and 159th Sailors Creek.
That's true. That's true.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
we got some snow. It's that same storm that they got in Pennsylvania, but yeah,
We didn't get
parts
any
of
snow here, but they
no,
did
because
north.
we're right on the ocean, but the little further up north of the city, New Hampshire got 6 inches of snow in April.
Wow.
There you go. Huh? There you go. Shoveling your driveway in April.
No
Then come
thanks.
inside, watch the baseball game.
Yeah.
It's a weird psychology. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, but it's good. So it's good to get back to this. It's nice that it is nice to kind of take a week and just chill a little bit a weekend and just
Yeah.
kind of do some stuff. I got to go down to Washington last weekend and do some cool stuff. So now we're back at this, and yeah, we'll have to make a plans. What time are we supposed to do that thing with next Sunday? I thought that
I
was
don't
later in the
know. We
day.
should be talking about it on here though. People are not here to
Oh, I
talk
know. I'm
about Good
just
morning,
curious
Scott.
how the whole thing is. Blow my mind with the stuff. Anyway.
Good morning, Scott.
Mm.
Frank asked, yeah, this is non-Civil War related. So good morning, Scott. Frank asked, did you all survive the earthquake? Yes, there was an earthquake here yesterday. It was centered in New Jersey, and we're on a second floor apartment, and all of a sudden, like both our respective areas that we were in started shaking. The
Yeah.
room I was in, like the pictures kind of rattled on the wall a little bit, and it was like a good 30 seconds of like both of us had a moment where we were like 20 seconds into it, and we're like, is this going to get any more intense? Like, what do we do? But it was a very like it was just I've been in like four earthquakes before, and this was probably now 4.8, not that strong, but still, it was like enough to be like,
No, it was a good. It was kind of an odd feeling sitting here working from the house yesterday, and all of a sudden the whole thing started shaking. Pretty cool, but yeah, but it's a weird, obviously, it's a weird weather pattern when you got an eclipse on Monday and you got an earthquake yesterday and all that stuff, all centered around the anniversary of Sailors Creek and Shiloh.
And
I don't
Shiloh,
know
yeah,
that.
we actually have someone on here from Amanda, Ohio, which is about 10 miles from General Sherman's hometown of Lancaster. I've been to the Sherman home there, and it's cool, the Sherman home, and they have like a statue of him in the downtown and stuff. But obviously Sherman is buried in St. Louis, Missouri. And yeah, speaking of Sherman, Battle of Shiloh, he's not having a very good morning 162 years ago right now.
No,
He's
it's
realizing that Colonel Appler was indeed right, and there were indeed rebels across the way.
no. We talk, we talk a lot about these battles, and you look at some of the people who fought at Shiloh. And Shiloh was obviously, when you look at the whole what was going on around that time. Sherman, he's on the far Union flank. He's got McClernand right next to him, right? and guys like Prentice and Stephen Hurlbut and all
Yes.
this line, and he ends up having to deal with William Hardy and Patrick Claver we talked
Yeah.
about last time.
It wasn't Claiborne's guys that Appler heard, because didn't Claiborne almost give away the position that night?
Would have been Claiborne coming right through, yeah. And so we did an episode on Shiloh. God, it's been a couple of years now, but what's interesting about if you look at the way that whole battle went, right, is you look at the lines of the Confederate lines, and they all kind of came in one big line. Hardee, Bragg, Polk, Breckinridge, bang, 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 bang. And they start moving up and they start spreading out. And it's when they spread out, they all get commingled. I mean, this is early in the war. So you end up Hardee is going to be on the left, and then you got Polk to his right. Bragg is going to veer off to the right, and then Breckinridge is going to go in that far right.
At one point, Bragg was giving Claiborne orders, and Claiborne was like, "What the hell's going on here?"
Yeah, and it's neat because and then you end up driving them back, and Sherman gets pushed back, McClernand gets pushed, Prentice and Hurlbut. Hurlbut is they're all, and no one talked about Stephen Hurlbut, but we'll give him his press, give him his love, because
there's a lot about Shiloh, that Shiloh is not just interesting for the battle, the fact that it is the first biggest battle, like, kind of the one that everybody goes, oh my God, this is like some serious stuff here. It's also the one where studying the aftermath, like the politics that are going on both sides behind the scenes, are just as equally fascinating. You have Grant, who somehow has to, he wins the day in the end, but like he's got to somehow be like, okay, how do I write my battle report and tell this story? And he ends up throwing poor Lew Wallace under the bus, which I'm Team Wallace all the way on that. And I know, like, yes, Wallace was slow getting there, but if you look at what happened to him, the messages and all that, of course you're going to be confused if you're Lew Wallace. You're like, well, do you want me to turn around? Do you want me to go this way?
Yeah, it was a mess. And there's a lot of cool things. I mean, that whole part of the war is really, it was kind of setting up that, like, the foundational part of the American Civil War heading out in the West. And we're going to do an episode this week. We're going to do an episode on the Battle of Island Number 10.
Yeah.
And it's about as generic as a title as you're going to get. But when you look at that, and not a lot of people study that. The actual island's long gone; it's submerged and all that stuff. But when we talk about, it's almost like the dry run for later on with Vicksburg, with the rivers, because you're going to have the Mississippi River, and Fort Donelson and Henry are going to be taking place on the other side. This is going to take place on the Mississippi, where the water runs hard south, and you're going to have really John Pope is going to have his big moment here, and this is a lot of that when he comes out. That's going to lead to Second Manassas. This is where a lot of his confidence comes from, right? And you're going to have Andrew Foote's going to make an appearance in this one, obviously, going up against a couple of like obscure Confederate generals and John Clown McCown, right? You're going to have him as well as William McKinley. But you're going to have a situation where you're going to have New Madrid, which is going to be where John Pope's going to be, and they're going to have to connect the Navy to get past this Island Number 10 to help begin to control the Mississippi, which is going to lead to eventually the Battle of Vicksburg. It's the Siege of Vicksburg and breaking through. And if it isn't for, it sounds, we always talk about how little battles turn into big battles. If it isn't for getting through this, defeating this garrison on Island Number 10, who knows what happens? Because they tried to dig a canal, that didn't work, because it's a shape like a U, right in the middle. Think of like a Drano commercial with a clog. The clog is Island Number 10.
We've been talking about plumbing this morning, but here we are.
Yeah, but the clog is right in there, and so they tried to. So here's the U, and they're trying to dig across, can't do it. So they got to sail through, and the island's right there. And the Confederates really loaded up. And when you talk about some of the ways they had to get through there, it's like the DeSoto Canal. It's like the prequel of what Grant tried to do at Vicksburg. And so not a lot of people know Island Number 10. Not a lot of people study Island Number 10. There's no.
I know our friend Tony likes it. He's been wanting us. I remember him saying one time, this is years ago, him saying to us, "You guys got to do an episode about Island Number 10." For some reason, he likes that.
Well, you'd have to be Aquaman to be an Island Number 10, reenactor nowadays, unfortunately. But I mean, but back then, the Confederates had it loaded up, and so to get past that, to really take the control of the early part of the Mississippi River, which was going to lead to later things, they had to get through it. It's a very pivotal part, and it's right up by Cairo. It's not far away. The Confederates are going to leave New Madrid basically without a shot. They're going to fall back.
Yeah.
And they're going to leave like all these weapons, like 30 plus guns and thousands of rifles, just going to leave them there and walk away and say, okay, we're not dealing with this. So now Pope has control of that town. He just has to connect the Navy. And he has to get by the island to connect. And it's a fascinating thing the way they do it. And people don't like to, well, I don't say don't like to, but they don't talk about John Pope in the positive. You always think about Second Manasseh.
Yeah, well, because he comes into the Eastern Theater so negatively with his whole like in the West we blah blah blah, like made that one comment. Some people here are talking about Shiloh. Miranda said she was there for the 150th 3 weeks before she got married. Tammy's going to Shiloh and Corinth in June. And Scott
Very cool.
mentioned, and then back to island number 10, Scott mentions that a friend's relative was Colonel Smith, CSA, captured island number 10, sent to Johnson's Island. He's looking forward to that episode.
Yeah. No, it's just, but it's one of those things when you talk, it's almost like that theater's version of Second Winchester in a little bit.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the prequel of Vicksburg. It really is. When you study it, it's like a mini version of the Siege of Vicksburg in a lot of ways, specifically when they had to run the gauntlet. And they take a couple of boats and go north of between the northern side and in island number 10. They sneak through. The Confederates have floating guns on there, and it's a bunch of mess. I mean, the Confederates try to put guns on stilts and they sink. Yeah. And it's a fascinating study. And you talk about a lot of guys, William McCall, mentioned John McCown. They're Confederate guys who people don't really study, don't really spend a lot of time talking about. They're not household names. But again, you're talking about the Confederates losing 7,000 guys. Yeah, mostly captured, admittedly. They all quit and surrendered. And it ends up being a real gigantic part of right in that Kentucky bend of the river that leads to bigger things. So I'm looking forward to talking about that. We want to do this one for a while. So we'll talk about this. And it's just, I mean, I don't know if they should have had a better name for it. It does sound like, going to like the Walmart and buying generic beer or something, I know. But it's cool. It's cool. We'll have a lot of fun with that. So we'll do that. We'll record that probably next Friday, right?
Yeah. Bill Etzkorn says, I prefer the Battle of Islands in the Stream. General Rogers was a tough guy.
It's also was a Battle of New Madrid, but island number 10 is what most people know it as. But yeah, Islands in the Stream is probably going to be it's probably going to be a meme about that for the episode, realistically. But
Tammy mentions it's her second trip to Corinth and Shiloh, but now she knows her ancestors who fought there. So that's really interesting.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
pretty cool.
Frank said island number 10 is to Vicksburg as the Battle of Shroot Farms is to Gettysburg.
Well, I mean, it's important though. I mean, it's an important one because you have the ability to now control that Kentucky bend of the Mississippi, right? And when you look at the what's interesting is you look at the Tennessee River and you look at the Mississippi rivers, they both flow different directions, right?
Yeah.
So if Andrew Foote's boats get disabled, they're going to float south right into the Confederates. They're going to get captured. Yeah. So they're going to fight the currents. So there's a lot of intrigue in this one. I think that if the Confederates had put up a better fight, right? They tried to get men from Earl Van Doren's guys, and they were too busy because a lot of this stuff. All these things are all going on around the same time. I mean, you're talking about and people don't realize the island number 10 siege is like a month and a half. It goes from the end of February and ends on April 8th.
Yeah.
Right. And so this goes on and on and on. And what else is going on April 8th, right?
Shiloh.
So you've got this just downstream now, Pittsburgh Landing, you've got the Battle of Shiloh going on. So the Rebs can't get any more troops because they're all up to their ass in whatever freaking alligators that phrase is, right? They have to get those guys. So now you got a small skeleton crew.
Yeah.
And you're just basically end up getting the whole garrison bagged. And the Union can't spare anymore either.
No.
Don Carlos Buell, Army of the Ohio, they're going to Pittsburgh Landing. So Pope is going to be the one, John Pope and Andrew Foote are going to be the ones who have to break this garrison. And so while everything's going on at Shiloh, they're breaking through island number 10, setting up the eventual sail down the Mississippi, which is going to lead to Vicksburg. That's why it's important. And that's why it's an understudy battle, but it's an important battle. And Vicksburg doesn't happen if it wasn't for island number 10.
Yeah. There's a lot, like you said, like a lot of these little battles are like leading into the bigger ones. So what else is going on April 8th? The Rex Manning Day. I have no idea who that is.
She's talking about.
Um,
It's like looks like Miranda's. We're not the only ones drinking today.
Poor Miranda. Um, anyway, so yeah, and like, it's kind of like Second Winchester or whatever, like each one is leading into something else kind of thing. But like with Shiloh, like is kind of the battle that really, I think it's starting to really hit these soldiers that I know Bull Run did. Like it's kind of like, well, this is going to be a long war. But then when you see the casualty numbers coming out of Shiloh and the stories of how horrific it was, and like um one of the things that I don't think I mentioned this in our episode about Pat Claiborne, but he was like that night of April 6th, he was like not happy with the Federals. I mean, for a variety of reasons, but one of them was because they kept shelling during the night. And he thought it's like, guys, stop it. And the shells kept landing where the wounded Union and Confederate
Yeah,
were
no,
and killing
it's pretty
them.
bad.
And that's like, it's from Empire Records.
Oh.
The show it's
No,
from the 90s.
God, I
Yeah.
know.
Anyway, so yeah, and the shells were landing right where the Union and Confederates were wounded, and he just thought that was terrible. That like here these guys are out in like kind of no man's land, nobody's coming to get them, and they're having like shells and shrapnel land on them. And
You can imagine like when you get to like Cold Harbor and places like that, you can imagine Grant like just kind of sitting around going, remember how we were bad? They were shelling us and we were shelling them at night. How silly and how young we were. How
can you
brutal
remember
war
that?
gone. Well, do you know how
You see him sitting around with Sherman. Do you remember that time when that Colonel Appler came to you and was like, "There's men there," and you basically told him to F off and go back
yeah.
to Ohio, and it turned out there was guys there?
Yeah, that's just funny. Just picture some of the conversations they have with some of these things. But no, but Shiloh was, I mean, it was more casualties, in all American wars up to that point. I mean, you're talking about 24,000 casualties combined in this battle. And you think about it, and we've said this before, how lucky you get sometimes. And we've said the three equalizers in every battle, terrain, weather, communications. In this one, the weather got them. And those couple of days that rain hits, like the one we had here, that storm, it's going to delay Albert Sidney Johnston, PGT Beauregard, just a couple of days. And what happens after the first day on April 6th, Grant's pushed back, and then Buell shows up to save the day. If that's 2 days before,
Yeah, the weather really does factor into it as well. And then you have like this kind of Frank mentions the visitor center there is really cool. And they've got he said it's eerie to see how they still have mass Confederate graves at Shiloh.
Yeah.
And there was someone, our friend LC was saying, the post we did about Shiloh, he was saying how pristine, and we've heard that from people, how pristine of a battlefield that Shiloh is. But it's this like, you have the weather, you also have this like command on the Confederate side and the Union side too. They're still trying to get their bearings. Albert Sidney Johnston has had like however long his front is. MJ Sherman, do you remember the time that guy in Manhunt portrayed me as a gentle, caring soul? Oh yeah, that was weird.
No, that's I mean that show that show I'm enjoying it, but yeah, there's issues but when we have Dave Taylor with us, we're going to do an episode about the Manhunt series on Apple TV, and it's fascinating in a lot of different ways. But I mean, it's funny how there are some characters they really get right and some they really get wrong. I was disappointed in the Willie Jett character, admittedly, and Bainbridge wasn't even in it, which is kind of weird. Okay, fine. That's like having Hall and Oates with no oats, right? Just think about it.
Yeah.
But they have portray Willie Jett as this matter of fact guy, where in real life he was a fanboy, right? Mm-hmm. It'd be like if you bumped into Oliver Otis Howard. My God, Oliver. But that's how. But he was just kind of like, you could do this, do that.
Yeah, he was very. It was kind of like, and Sherman was way too like I said to you, not bring up Howard again. I said how Sherman reacted to Stanton was more of I think how Howard would have been. Sherman was like he was so quiet, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll sign that." It's like Sherman was the one that came up with 40 acres and a mule.
It does now. Just real quick, I mean, if you go back in time a few months in this series, okay, Stanton's going to come to Savannah to rip Sherman a new one for drowning all the slaves at Ebenezer Creek. Okay, so to see Sherman portrayed again with Stanton as this let me do what I can do to help and then
Yeah,
they
I
have
will
that one,
sign it.
and that guy's on his knees praying and crying, tears rolling down his eyes, kind of like the year after the Cubs lost the World Series, and then won the World Series in 16. But it was but it doesn't get them right. Now, yeah, you can give Sherman all the credit for the 640 acres and a mule. The one guy that they really get right is Andrew Johnson, because he was a prick. And the thing about it too is, we would talk about this last night as we were watching it, is there are a lot of people who glorify Abraham Lincoln, and a lot of people in your old world, the Lincoln world, right? Say the guy walks on water and all that, but it's tough. It's tough in real time to look the fact that he replaced Hannibal Hamlin with this guy. Yeah. Right. So when we talk a lot about John Wilkes Booth kind of screwing up Reconstruction because of killing Lincoln, what is Lincoln thinking putting Andrew Johnson in charge? Yeah. Now, you don't expect to ever be shot. I get all that. No. But he wasn't going to lose the election with Hamlin. It wasn't. No. And so it just seems, when you look back, if you want to make, you could say the two really bad decisions by Lincoln. Well, three if you cover Mary, right? Two, okay. Obviously,
the Mary Lincoln people, right?
the 75,000 call-ups, yes, which allowed the other states, Virginia, to secede. Yeah, but putting an Andrew Johnson as your VP, and I realize there's elections, people get voted in position. I get it. It's not like it is now, but the way that whole thing went down, and it's not like it is now. You president picks a VP, so it's not all Lincoln. But to be in that position, it's one of those things. It's just fascinating,
Yeah, no, and you really see it in this. I thought the whole thing with Sherman was so surreal. I was like, this is not how it went down. They're not even mentioning Ebenezer Creek. I get it. They only have a certain amount of time, but that's why Stanton went down there, was because he was pissed about it. He was like, you need to tell me what exactly happened with this Jefferson C. Davis guy and Ebenezer Creek. Yeah. And the funny thing is I was having a discussion on a Civil War group that I'm not a part of anymore, about Ebenezer Creek. And there are people that will rush to the defense of that. And, I'm like, I get it. It was in orders, but there is parts of Ebenezer Creek that were not orders. It's terrible. And then there's this one article out there that says it was Jefferson C. Davis was with Howard. So then they were jumping all over Howard for saying, how could this so-called abolitionist let this happen? So I had to say, well, Howard wasn't in charge of Jefferson C. Davis. Slocum was. It's more on Slocum, but I don't think Slocum knew what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of different things about it. And we talked before about Samuel Mudd, and he's one that they get right and they get wrong. It's funny how it is, because he's a very pro-slavery, pro-secesh guy. The character of Mary, his slave, is pretty solid. Yeah. But I kind of wish, they would do a throwback, because, December of 1864, Samuel Mudd is going to introduce John Surratt to John Wilkes Booth in Washington, D.C. while they're out Christmas shopping. It's a stage meeting that they met, not far from the White House, actually. And so I wish they would have put that in, but they found a way to get Mudd right and wrong at the same time. Yeah. Because it's unless you really read a lot about the assassination, there are subtle things about him. But the character who plays him, the guy from Veep, the TV show there, is really, really good. But it's funny. I'm glad. I mean, you had Thomas Jones had one scene. Samuel Cox had one scene. Yeah. Bainbridge wasn't even in it. Willie Jett gets one scene. He's this big jacked guy. That's not who he was. And then you have Stanton, who's riding up front with these guys, and it looks like the Boston Corbett character, they're about to get that totally wrong too.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting for Doherty. Doherty is a key part of this, and I mean, I'm not just saying that because Doherty was Canadian.
I bet you he's not even in it.
I know, which is
and I get it. It's
they can't have everybody, but Doherty's
it's historical fiction. Yeah, I mean, Doherty's the head of the 16th New York, the Lincoln Avengers, the LAs, and so, but he doesn't. But I guess I appreciate the fact that they're getting done anyway.
Exactly. It's going to get somebody interested in it. I do want to, when this is over, I do want to go back and watch the Killing Lincoln documentary again. Yeah. Because that one was just the guy that played Booth, Jesse Johnson, was so good. And they had they did mention Doherty as being like
Yeah, no, I know.
and it was
And
really,
again,
that's a really, like, Doherty, just real quick, he's Canadian, but he joined he became part of the 16th New York Cavalry, the Lincoln's Avengers, as they're called, and he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And that's something, again, Canadian history, we don't talk about our role in the Civil War much, and I think it is such a cool story about that. And there was another guy from my hometown, last name of Keys, that was involved in the capture of Jeff Davis as well. There's a street named after him, but nobody in my town knows that. They're just like, oh, it's Keys Street. Who is this guy? And it turns out he was involved with the capture of Jefferson Davis.
Yeah.
MJ said she looked up Mary Sims, the former slave, and she left Mudd before the assassination, but her testimony was key against him in his trial. Goes to Sickles Lake said, so it's appropriate to say Mudd got dragged through the mud.
Well, I mean, you look at the fact of, like, you and I have talked about this. We're just sitting around talking about Mudd and should he have been hanged or should he not have been. You're very much of a should have been hanged school, right?
I'm just like, I don't. Well, I mean, my whole thing on the assassination is that I don't think I think it should have all been time in jail, because that's what Mudd got, and he was way more involved than even, say, George Atzerodt was. I think today they would have just got life in prison, and it was like, basically, what they did was terrible, don't get me wrong, but I don't think Mary should have hung, any of that. But I think if George Atzerodt is up there on the gallows, then Dr. Mudd absolutely should have.
Well, I mean, you got to remember, when these 9 judges, which was for Hunter and Couts and Howe and Aiken, Clendenin, Wallace, Foster, Harris, and Tompkins, those are the 9 justices, right?
Yeah.
They used the litmus test of, did you know about the assassination or do you just know about the kidnapping, right? So if you knew about the kidnapping, you're going to get life in prison. If you knew about, or some sort of point, if you knew that it was an assassination, you were going to be hanged. So you look at the people who were hanged, right? Harold, Powell, Surratt, and Atzerodt. Obviously Powell, obviously Harold, obviously Atzerodt knew there was going to be an assassination. They were part of the conspiracy. So that gets them. So they gets Mary Surratt on. Did she know whether or not it was still a kidnapping plot or whether it was an assassination? Now you go back to our friend Dr. Kay Larson. She's very much of the Mary was guilty thing, and she clearly likely knew something was afoot at the Circle K, right? She knew something was going down even that night, because she had sent the field glasses and the shooting irons down to Surrattsville. But did she know that there was going to be an assassination, or did she think it was still going to be a kidnapping? And you can sit there and say, well, Richmond's fallen. Why the hell would they kidnap him still? But there was no real smoking gun evidence besides the John Lloyd testimony and the Louis Weichman testimony that she knew about the assassination. And both of those people were testifying to save their own asses. If you read The Judicial Murder of Mary Surratt, it's a book that came out, and you read the testimony, it's really tough to realize that it's anything more than circumstantial evidence. She's not innocent. She knew something was up. And I'll say this before. I've said this to you before. If I'm John Wilkes Booth and I'm going to go shoot Abraham Lincoln, and I'm going to go meet with her in the parlor on H Street at Surratt Boarding House, which they did, is he going to tell someone that he's about to shoot the president before?
No.
Especially someone of your friend's mother.
I remember she, like, we don't talk to her anymore, but remember when that person tried to tell you that, I'm a mother and I know what's going on in all my kids' lives, so Mary absolutely knew what was happening, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, she didn't.
No, I mean, now, did he sit there and say, okay, Mary, I'm going to go shoot Lincoln.
Yeah.
Here's what I want you to do. If that happened, okay, then she knew about it. Then she deserved to get, but there was no evidence that tied it together. The only case that really came against her was someone knocked on the door before 12 p.m. there, before the assassination. So it was probably about 7 o'clock. Someone knocks on Mary's door, knock, 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 says, hey, your son, and this Atzerodt guy, they've rented my boat down in Port Tobacco. They haven't paid me yet. I'd like to get paid, please. And according to the testimony, she said, you need to leave. They're going to use the boat tonight. You need to leave.
Yeah.
So she clearly knew something was up that night, whether it was an assassination or it was still a kidnapping. And that's what's cool about studying the assassination, is that no one really knows. Um,
It's
me
also
personally,
like no one knows.
I think she knew that something was going down.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine, if you're going to shoot the president, you're going to start running your mouth. Now, again, the counterpoint to that argument is, once he did shoot the president, every drive-through Booth went into, every Dunkin' Donuts, he told what he did after the fact.
Like, guess what I did?
Hi, how are you? I shot the president. You know,
sir, this is Duncan.
He runs into Bainbridge and Willie Jett. Hi, how you doing? I shot the president. I mean, he was proud of it. So maybe he did tell Mary. Who knows? But there's no real black and white evidence.
No.
And the case of the matter is, 5 of those 9 judges, right? There'd be Tompkins, Foster, Eakin, Couts, and Hunter, submitted that form after the sentencing for Mary to get life in prison. And then Andrew Johnson mysteriously made it disappear.
Yeah.
So who knows? It's one of the great mysteries in history is the conspiracy and the assassination. But I like Manhunt. I think they're doing a good job with that. I'm enjoying it.
No, it's good. It's good they're doing it. And yeah, there are some, like, I'm kind of like, you know, like there's some stuff like the Sherman thing and all that is kind of just eye rolling. But if it gets somebody into it, reading the books, learning more about it, then it's done its job. It's also historical fiction. So it's meant to be loosely based on the events. They're talking about Mudd. Bill Etzkorn mentions
his name is Mudd.
Bill Etzkorn mentions, I remember the 1980s news anchor Roger Mudd tried to push the Dr. Mudd was innocent, and he said he didn't buy it. And yeah, I mentioned, I said to Ghost of Sickles Lake, I'm like, your name will be Mudd. And then Miranda mentions it's based on Mudd. And there is some debate about that. I kind of think it is. I remember, like, my grandmother would always say, you know, whatever, and then said to me, your name will be Mudd. And I finally asked her, what is Mudd? Who is Mudd? And she explained to me, and I was like 4 or 5, who Dr. Mudd was and what he did. And that was kind of my first introduction to the Lincoln assassination, was this guy named Dr. Mudd. And she clearly thought he was guilty.
Well, as I understand it, the name, your name will be Mudd, preceded the assassination.
Yeah, but then it became connected.
So it's very similar to the phrase hooker. Yeah. Right, where Hooker predated Joe Hooker, but because Hooker likes to get a swerve on with the ladies, right, that name kind of took on that. I've always, growing up, say if your name is Mudd was always Samuel Mudd, but I think he helped restructure that. But the thing I forgot there was a reason why I mentioned Mudd a while ago with this, was the evidence to convict him didn't connect him to the assassination either, though, because he clearly knew that there was something going on. He did, like I said, he did introduce John Surratt to John Wilkes Booth. And he knew that there was going to be a kidnapping plot. He helped, with John Surratt and Booth to help plot the trail out of there. But the connection between Booth and Mudd kind of drops after that. So I don't know if he thought, he clearly recognized him. I mean, he just definitely did. But there's nothing. So if you're being consistent with everything, he did not, there was no connection knowing he was going to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. No. Yeah. So that's why he went to Dry Tortugas in Florida, along with McLaughlin and Samuel Arnold, right? Yeah. And Edwin Spangler. I'm glad Peanuts got off, by the way. Peanuts would have been screwed.
Peanuts.
But seriously, but they had that's how it all went down. But when you look at the fact that they retried John Surratt in 1867 with the same witnesses, the same people, and they got a hung jury, no pun intended, okay, all because it was in a civilian trial, not a military trial.
Yeah.
And you're using the military trial for the first one because the war was still going on. They considered Washington, D.C. a fort, a military fort, hence it was a crime committed on a military fort, hence the military trial. I get all that. But they brought the whole gang back together again. Same evidence, the whole deal, except he was found not guilty. It was hung jury. And John Surratt, he ends up doing a speaking tour of basically what I did.
And then they told him, like, dude, if you keep this up.
He gave a speech explaining what he did for the kidnapping from the Cooper Union, where Lincoln gave a speech.
So bad.
And they finally said to him, by the way, you're giving us more evidence. We can retry you. And he stopped doing a speaking tour.
Well, better stop.
Now he's buried in Congressional Cemetery. You can go visit his grave with all.
I'd like to know where he spoke. I wonder if he ever came up to speak in Canada, because we were harboring him up there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but it's a fascinating study when you look at the characters involved. I mean, Joseph Holt, John Bingham, Henry Burnett. They're like the prosecutors, but they're nudging the justices.
Yeah.
So David Hunter would there be an objection, Your Honor, from Frederick Aiken, one of the most incompetent attorneys that you'll ever find, the defense attorney. That's because Reverdy Johnson gave him the old see you later, right?
Yeah.
But their objections, and Holt would look over to Hunter and say, yep, it's okay. And they would let it go. It was a kangaroo court. There's no question it was. But none of those guys were getting off. None of them were.
No, I mean, there's some level of make an example so this doesn't happen again, but there's also some level of like, oh my God, this is going to screw the country up so bad. The one thing I didn't agree with that was mentioned last night was Stanton was like, oh my God, they're stopping Reconstruction. It's like, dude, I was kind of like, you might want to sit down because it ain't gonna get much better.
Yeah, no, it's there. Look, yeah, obviously we've talked before. There's definitely some boo-boos historically with this, but it doesn't take take away from the big picture. No. It really, really doesn't. I mean, I think it's cool. I think it's fun seeing the development of some of the characters. I mean, we've said before, Thomas Eckhart gets screwed. I mean, everything you're seeing Stanton doing in real life, it was Thomas Eckhart. So he if I was his agent, if I'm calling Miss Cleo and pulling out the old Ouija board, I'd be complaining if I was him, because it's making Stanton look like Batman here.
Well, one point I said to you last night, I'm like, what is he, Columbo now?
Oh, let's see when he's measuring the footprints.
Is he Columbo?
This is an Air Jordan. This is definitely John Surratt. Some of it, yes, you check your brain at the door type thing. But like I said before, the people who sit there and say, "Well, I can't watch this because of the beard."
Oh, like, yeah, those
are the people who don't really know the history and they just want to find something to pick about. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, we were watching the Grant miniseries that came up, and this is back, we had individual Twitter accounts, and we were following Twitter, and people are like, this didn't happen because he held the pen in his left hand, and they're doing this stuff to show everybody how smart they are. You're definitely seeing that a little bit with this manhunt thing. Yes. And I get not everyone studies the assassination. I get it. It's kind of a niche thing, but it is funny reading some of the comments. The beard thing, yes, Stanton should have a beard, and the guy who plays him probably isn't the best guy to play him. But I mean,
I personally like him because he is capturing some of Stanton's personality. I like that they have his wife in there. I like that they're showing how bad Stanton's asthma was, because that's ultimately what is going to kill him. And they're starting to hint at the fact that like Johnson is about to rake Stanton over the coals. Like Stanton nearly gets kicked out as Secretary of War. But it's like I said, it's entertainment, as Bill Hammond just said. Like, I'm just glad there's more history to watch, and that's how I feel about it too. I hate to see the real nitpicking of it, because it's like, oh my God, you're going to turn someone away that might wanted to have watched it.
Well, I'll tell you right now, if anybody who's into the history of this whole Booth thing, you got to do the Escape Tour, because I'll tell you, it was a number one bucket list item historically for a long time. But I finally did it a couple of years ago, and it's going to take you the whole day, and you're going to go to a lot of different places. But it's really cool, and you're going to go right down through. You go through Surrattsville, Sakaya Swamp, Port Tobacco, the whole deal, the Pine Thicket, cross the Potomac, go over to Garrett's farm. And it's an absolutely gorgeous vista. I mean, the mud house is pristine. Surratt's house is pristine. The tavern, you can do a tour. You can see where they hung the shooting irons from the wall joist there. It's really, really cool. Walking through the Pine Thicket's really, really creepy, just because of the history that was there. Knowing these guys went through the Sagaya Swamp and Orland Swan. Just picture Orland Swan taking them through the swamp, and it's definitely, if you're into this part of history, it really should be a bucket list thing for you. Yeah. Because you can see the actual couch that John Wilkes Booth was resting on when he first got there. You can see his bedroom; it's all still there. And you go to Ford's Theater and you go in the basement and see a lot of the original stuff, like his compass. Although the knife is fake, the knife is wrong.
I think Dave Taylor talked about. It was funny. Ford's Theater came up in one of my classes the other day with we were talking about kind of like repatriation of artifacts. We were talking at one point about how the British Museum needs to give some shit back to people. But then
Yeah.
we came up, we were talking about examples in the US of where a museum has an item where you're kind of like, huh. And I didn't think anybody in my class would know. And I said, well, there is the Henry Ford and they have the Lincoln assassination chair. And then one of my classmates was like, whoa, like, she's like, I've always wondered why it's there and not at Ford's Theater. And we were talking about, you know, how they're like the Henry Ford will say like, oh, it's because it couldn't be kept in the right conditions and stuff. Meanwhile, Ford's Theater has the right conditions for it. And you can like, I mean, it was given to Henry Ford as a gift because it was kept in the basement of Ford's Theater for a long time.
Yeah.
And like a lot of what people think is blood on that chair is not blood, it's actually hair oil because people used to go sit in the chair and like kind of rub their heads on it and stuff. And it was like just the oil that men used to put in their hair. There was a little bit of blood on it. But they hold on to that because it is like, it's a drawing point for people to come to the museum. But so as they have like the Kennedy assassination car there too, and they got a bunch of other cool stuff. But I have like ever since like I visited when I was like 6, and I said to my grandma, I'm like, why is this not in Washington? That's where he was shot. He wasn't shot here.
They used to have the shirt where the blood stains that ran down the front. But well, I remember when I was like in the 6th grade, when I did a school field trip to Washington, D.C. one time, I remember seeing that. And I've been at Ford's Theater dozens of times since then, and they haven't seen it since. So I don't know what the hell happened with that.
No.
But
mentions that there's some direct descendants of Sam Mudd that live in
yeah, they're in Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah, they're still in Michigan.
But, MJ mentioned they're not happy about the trail of their ancestors.
No one likes to see their ancestors run through the mud, right? But that's the reality is that, you know, look, people are different now. And you can look, you can sit there and say, well, you know, I don't like people attacking my ancestors, whatever, but it's a different world back then. This didn't happen last Thursday. This happened 50 plus years, 159 years ago. But if you go to Ford's Theater, you got to go around the back, the alley. It's see the Savannah of Ford's Theater. Because it's really, really cool because that alley still, I took my kid there last time.
Yeah.
Last weekend we went down there. I showed him where the back alley was, and he's not a big history guy. I'm dragging him around Washington D.C. and his eyes are rolling. But I said that's actually cool.
I snuck behind there in high school. I told some of my friends, I'm like, I just got to go check out the back of the theater because I was telling them about it, and they're like, okay. And then all of a sudden you hear my teacher's like, "Where's Mary? She's around the back of the theater."
Probably at the Star Tavern throwing IPAs back.
Yeah, that's exactly. Oh, good morning, David. David, your Detroit Tigers. I know Ghost of Sickles Lake mentioned them too. Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, Tigers doing well. That's pretty cool. A lot of teams doing well. Like Red Sox are in first place, Mario.
My team, according to the what is it? The hit what is it called?
Run differential. The Cleveland
Indians are the best team in baseball.
That's okay. This is what. So if you're a Red Sox fan, this is like that time where like you tell a lie and you're that great buffer zone until you get caught. It's one of those deals, like you're living in the buffer. But hey, I'll enjoy it for what it's worth right now. It's all good. It's all good. But if you go to DC and you go to that Chinatown area, you can see a lot of cool stuff with that. But I think I think most people agree with this, that the Manhunt thing, if you're really into the history, yes, it's going to be it's off, but it's entertaining. I'm really looking forward to doing this with Taylor in a few weeks.
Oh yeah.
Because first of all, he's I don't think there's anybody on the planet who knows the assassination conspiracy.
No, and he is such a nice guy. He is so good to sit and talk with, and he's funny and he's down to earth too. I think he's working in a library now too.
Yeah, he's down in Granbury, Texas. He used to live in Maryland, but no, if you go into YouTube, and you put his name in, this is a couple of years ago now. He actually spent a lot of time sleeping in the woods of the pine thicket, pretending to be, and he even had the fake limp. I mean, he like tried to relive, but he lasted like a day and it got cold and he went home. But still, he used to be the one. He used to run the Booth Escape Tour. Yeah, and he's since moved away. But he's on. We did our 50th episode with him. It was on the Lincoln assassination. So we're going to bring him back again. We're going to dust him off from the mothballs and bring him back and talk about this. And
we've been wanting to bring him back for a while because he was such a fun guest to have on. You know, he's kind of like Jay Price. Like Jay Price has been on for every single Halloween episode, and we always I swear during the year we're always like getting ready for that episode, gathering the ghost stories for
Oh,
that.
it's definitely a lot of fun. But I think when you bring Dave on and you're talking about the Booth assassination, it's great because I mean this is a guy who like literally he was a second grade school teacher,
Mhm.
dealing with that whole thing. And so he's not a bookie professor or anything like that. This is a spare hobby of his. But he does speak. He portrays John Wilkes Booth sometimes and
Yeah.
speak
He's
on
portrayed Mud,
presentations.
I think, before too.
He actually somehow, some way, got to do a presentation about John Wilkes Booth at the Lincoln Library.
Yep.
I mean, you
Because he's
think about
that
that for a
good.
second.
Because he's
And do you
that
know? And
good.
do you know they used to have a John Wilkes Booth statue,
Yeah.
right? Do you know where that statue is now?
Dave Taylor owns
They
it.
gave it to Dave Taylor, and it was funny because they mailed it to him. I remember him telling me the story. They mailed it to him, and they go, "Did you get the statue? We're going to send you a surprise." They sent him the John Wilkes Booth statue, and he goes, "Did it arrive safely?" And he says, "Yeah, but the packing was all screwed up because the right leg came broken." you know, but we're going to have him on to talk about Manhunt here in a few weeks. We got to pick a date to do that, but hopefully people check that out. It's a great history. There's a lot of misconceptions, obviously.
Yeah.
Finest Bates will tell you that he's still alive, working at the Sunoco station
Oh,
down in Watertown
God.
down here. But that's what's cool about history is you can have fun with that. But I'm looking forward to that. We're gonna have some good stuff coming too.
Yeah. Yeah. Lisa's on here speaking of
Booth,
Asia Booth. And her Civil War poetry as well. We're going to be seeing Lisa next weekend, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, next Sunday I think we're gonna be hanging with her and hanging with the truth.
That's the truth.
Yeah, we'll be doing that. That'll be that's too funny. But absolutely. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. So we got a bunch of episodes planned out. We have we're gonna have our episode coming up on Island number 10.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to have Alan Gelzo on, Mary.
Yes, to talk about his new book.
To talk about his new book, Voices from Gettysburg. So he'll be joining us for an episode in a couple of weeks. That'll be cool.
And then we are going to be doing, one of our kind of biography episodes. We're going to be talking about Lew Wallace, which is one I've wanted to do for a long time because I really, like, I love Lew Wallace. He's so, I find he's he's so, in many ways, like, misunderstood, I think, because of what happened at Shiloh. And where I really gained an appreciation for him was from doing Monocacy. And I was like, wow, this guy, and then like our friend Kevin is from Cincinnati. He's always mentioning about how he, all the stuff that Wallace did in Cincinnati, but Wallace, like, he's put in the doghouse after Shiloh because Grant needed a scapegoat who wasn't named Sherman. And it happened to be Lew Wallace. And I guess some of it is founded, but I mean, like, if I was Lew Wallace, I would have been like, no, we're not playing this game.
Yeah, no, that he's an interesting guy. Obviously, his high point is, obviously Monocacy, but he's also, going back to the Booth thing, he's part of the Justices. So he's one of those guys. And so who's part of it too. But no, he's one of those guys like a Rosecrans or a Longstreet, where sometimes perception and reality are two different things. So so that'll be a fun one to do. We'll certainly go with that. And but yeah, so it'll be good. I mean, the foolishness of Lew Wallace with the Billy the Kid stuff is just so ludicrous and stupid.
I read more about that, and it's like the judge basically said, like, dude, you just did something that you can't do. You can't make you can't make a deal with a guy, and you just did.
Well, I mean, the thing about Billy the Kid, he's a romantic, kind of like Jesse and Frank James are, but it's I was there was one time I would find myself sitting in a bar somewhere. I know that's a shocker, and somebody was talking about how Jesse James got a real bad deal, and I was like, okay, Jesse James. I mean, he people talk about him a lot with the robbing the trains, all that stuff later on. But he was part of Bloody Bill Anderson's gang. This is a guy who would literally wait outside of trains and execute unarmed Union soldiers getting off the train. So if you're going to romanticize Jesse James or Billy the Kid, I mean, just understand the big picture with this.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but Young Guns is not Billy the Kid. I hate to tell you, it's not. And these are people who I don't want to say got what they deserve, but they were not the greatest people in the world. And people, there are a lot of people. I'm sure people here know Jesse James' history with the Civil War and the Confederacy, especially with Anderson.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't. And these people were bushwhackers. They were mercenary killers fighting on their own in Missouri. Mm-hmm. I mean, but remember, that being said, Wallace was no picnic on certain things either. He had his flaws, but it'll be a fun conversation with that.
Yeah.
It's always fun talking about these people. Obviously, Monocacy is a big deal that doesn't get enough credit.
No.
But that's guys.
I like the story of Wallace and Ben-Hur. And just how that became like such a, like, I mean, I love the movie with Charlton Heston. It's got its flaws, but I love the movie. It's great. And it was one of my mother's favorites too. She watched it all the time. But I think like there's stories that he took a lot of what his anger that he had towards Grant and he put them in that book. Specifically, the chariot race was based off a horse race he had with Grant where he won. And so Grant was kind of that character, that friend who betrayed Ben-Hur. Totally betrayed him. And that's who that guy was based off Grant. And I think it was Wallace's way of kind of, I don't know, I want to say it was like his therapy for what happened to him, because I mean, Grant is like, geez, throws him under the bus kind of thing. But I think Wallace, like he gets his redemption at Monocacy. And he does like, he's like, well, I don't have enough men, so I'm not going to win this battle, but I am going to make it really hard for them to get to DC.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of did a big version of what Charles Tilden did at Gettysburg. He sacrificed his army to put a speed bump in the way, to put a crimp in, Jubal Early's deck, right? Yep. That's what he did.
Yeah.
That's what he did.
Especially, and John Brown Gordon never forgot about it either. Like it stuck with Gordon as well.
No, it's kind of like getting into Washington. It would have been like a little round top a little bit. They would have got there, but they would have been able to hold it.
Yeah.
But I mean, he bought time for Grant to send his 6th Corps up north from Petersburg to Washington to defend Fort Stevens, the whole deal. So you can attack Lew Wallace for anything you want. And I mean, I've got my own personal issues with Wallace because of the Mary Surratt thing.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
Because it isn't, but you can't deny Monocacy. And anybody who goes to Gettysburg, if you got the extra couple hours, go to Frederick. First of all, great bars in Frederick.
Frederick also has an amazing library system, which I think
there you go.
Work for.
But you can visit the Museum of Medicine. You can visit a lot of stuff, but you go see our friend Matt Borders, right, over at Monocacy, and you can visit that battlefield. And it's such a great place. It gives you more of an appreciation when you see some of these battlefields that are so close to Washington, D.C., that are still pretty pristine.
Yeah. Right? Monocacy is a wonder. I know MJ's been there and she loves it there. Ghost of Sickles Leg mentioned he's going to Gettysburg and area in October. So Ghost, if you've not been to Monocacy, definitely get there. It is I've been there twice and I can never, like, I always want to go back.
Yeah.
Like always want to go back.
No, it's a great place, and it's not part of the Gettysburg campaign, and people, like the Gettysburg people focus on the Gettysburg as they should. I get all that, but if you look at some of the stuff in the area, especially if you've been going to Gettysburg probably more often than you probably should, like a lot of people do, including us, you certainly want to be able to expand a little bit. You want to expand out. You want to go to Monterey. You want to go to Williamsport. You want to go to Winchester. You want to go to Stanton. You want to go to all of Bunker Hill, all the cool places that are on the retreat. But Monocacy is pretty cool, though, and it is when you talk about the fact that I told you I was down there last summer with my friend Eric, and he's not a Civil War nerd, but he appreciates history, and he remember we stopped. We didn't go to Monocacy, but we went to the brewery in Frederick, and he saw a sign for Battlefield of Monocacy, the battle that saved Washington. Yeah, he goes, I never heard of this. Explain it to me. I told him. He's like, how do I not know about this? I go, I don't know. It's probably a you problem, actually, Eric.
Yeah, nobody talks about it. And I don't know. I mean, I get it's a smaller battle, but if you go there and like talk to like Matt Borders, he like knows all of that. It's also where Order 191 was dropped as well, and they have like kind of a monument for that there.
Yeah, the site of where the 191 was actually found is a gravel pit now, so that area is gone. But it all took place there, and it's an important part of the Civil War is that area of Frederick. And when you're looking at the fact that McClellan kind of got into Frederick right as the Confederates were leaving, and it's how close it came. And the Battle of Gettysburg could have been the Battle of Frederick. And you know, when you look at all the stuff that went on, a lot of the stuff that took place in that Maryland area, Emmitsburg, for example, all that, the Taneytown, there's so much that could have taken place there. The Pipe Creek plan, which really is just, talk about Gettysburg, but Pipe Creek is one of those things where it'll be interesting to talk about this with Gelzo, by the way, because I don't know if you know this, Mary, he's not a big Meade fan.
No, he's not
right?
a big Longstreet fan.
No, I know he's not. But when you look at the fact that, and he talks a lot about setting up the Pipe Creek plan, and if he set up his line, which he was going to do, I mean, he always set up that plan with the assumption that Lee was going to attack him. There was never a guarantee Lee was going to attack him. Lee's there getting supplies. The Union might have sat there on this Pipe Creek plan while Lee scourged Pennsylvania. Eventually, so that's where the flaw is. And that's probably why Reynolds and those guys went forward with that reconnaissance and forced to fall back, is because you had to bait Lee into hitting you.
Yeah.
But if he just set up that Pipe Creek plan, and I think Gelzo's actually right about this, if he set up that Pipe Creek plan and stayed on those heights, there's no game. It was always, we're going to set up and then Lee's going to attack us. We're going to beat him because we're the best position. Why would Lee attack that? That was never his plan. Mm-hmm. So it might have been a situation where Lee is just ravaging the entire state of Pennsylvania, while Meade is staying between him and Washington, picking his nose, just staring at each other while Lee's doing that. I mean, that's probably what would have happened, though. I mean, realistically.
There's someone on here that said, I would love to see Malvern Hill and see what the heights are like. Malvern Hill, and I told them Malvern Hill's amazing.
Yeah, that's where Lou Armistead got the Poplar General nickname, because he hid behind the poplar tree.
Yeah.
No, but a lot of those battles are really, really cool. The 7 Days stuff, and what's cool about this is you study these things long enough, and you really study it, is you realize how they all tie into each other. They all do, right? Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this last time about how sending McDowell into the valley because of Stonewall Jackson. If you're looking for someone who foiled McClellan at the peninsula, it's not Lee, it's Jackson.
Yeah.
Because his presence and what he did post Kernstown, just being there, is what's gonna make Lincoln scared. Send all those men over without telling McClellan, and then June 1st, Lee takes over. 7 Days starts, but it's really that. I mean, people talk about Chancellorsville being Stonewall's best moment. It might be the psychological warfare he played on Lincoln.
Oh, he's doing what Sherman would do to the people of Georgia, but he's doing it on one person. He's doing it on Lincoln, and Jackson was really good at that. Like I said, I'm not a huge, I don't know. Jackson is definitely not my favorite, but he has his really, really good moments in the Civil War. Chancellorsville doesn't. I always hear of Chancellorsville. Look at how Howard ran. Look at how the 11th Corps ran. No one ever mentions how good Jackson was, and that maybe it doesn't matter who you are, you're getting routed out of that position.
A lot of these guys, they're better mentally than physically. Jackson, the psychology he pulled on Lincoln in the Valley, but also the psychology Lee played post Gettysburg on Meade, right? When you talk about that Culpeper V, when you talk about what leads up to the Battle of Bristoe Station, right? All that stuff that went on, Meade saw Lee in his sleep, the same way that Sherman probably saw Claiborne in his sleep, right? They all had their monsters under their bed they were afraid of. And you look at, Lee was able to basically sneak up on Grant's army without even firing a shot after Gettysburg. And people talk about the post-Gettysburg thing and the escape and all that. But look at later in 63, when Lee basically forced Grant all the way back again towards Harper's Ferry again after everything went down. Now, granted, Meade came back and fought, and they fought later on. But these guys were sitting there, just the cult of personality these guys had over the Union. Which is
they were in their heads and stuff. And I'm gonna butcher his name or her name. Geraint says, didn't Jackson literally fall asleep during the 7 days? There was Jackson was sleeping at Bronner's farm.
Yeah, he was
too.
asleep at he was asleep at Bronner's, but yeah. Now, since we're going to talk positive about Jackson, we can talk about negative about Jackson. People don't talk a lot. You talk about the Valley, you talk about Chancellorsville. You don't talk about the 7 days where he really pissed on his leg. He did,
Yeah.
and you talk about Kernstown. So they all have pluses and minuses. But that's why the cult of what Jackson could do was almost better than what he actually did physically, right? And that's not a shot on Jackson. I mean, that's a kudos to Jackson. Same thing with Lee too. Same thing with Sherman. Same thing with Grant. They still talk about the March for the Sea with Sherman.
Oh, yes.
Hell,
The
they
people in Georgia
Margaret
did not
Mitchell
like that.
wrote a whole book about the cult of personality of William Sherman.
Yeah, he
And-
definitely had a
right?
call. It was to the point too, where like I had to like deprogram my parents after we watched like we would watch Gone with the Wind, and then we watched like Bill O'Reilly's. They'd recorded it for me. I was telling MJ about this last night. They recorded an episode of Bill O'Reilly's Legends of the Civil War or something, and I'm like, ugh. I watched it to be nice because they were
Right.
like, look, you're into the Civil War, and there's this one part where Sherman walks into this woman's house and says, "Give me your jewelry, or I'm going to kill you." And my mom's like, "Oh, he really wasn't a nice man," and I'm like, "Oh, jeez." I did do all this like deprogramming.
No, but you can sit there. We've said before about how, you know, Claiborne is a better fighter than Jackson, which I agree with. I think he is, but I think mano a mano, Claiborne's going to beat you almost every time.
Oh,
The same,
absolutely.
and the other guy who's going to beat you almost every time is John Brown Gordon. Just not for nothing, right? If you're talking
John Brown
Confederates,
Gordon
right?
is like, I would not want to run into Gordon.
Right, but Jackson had that stigma about him, that aura,
Yeah.
where if you knew Jackson was out there, you were scared shitless.
Yeah.
Now, truth versus reality might not be the same thing, but he had it, and Lee obviously had it too. And so when everything was going on, you know, speaking of the Gettysburg campaign, and you know, people want to attack Lee for being selfish with his men. We talked a lot about that before. He wanted to go into Pennsylvania versus while Grant's coming steaming down the Mississippi, and he's going to go take Vicksburg and Jackson. Everything's going to be messed up there, and he's going to hold on to his men, and he didn't want to release his guys because he wanted to keep them in Virginia. That's a simplistic way to do it. Why would Lee give up his men when a couple of people, when you study the Gettysburg campaign, you got to look at this in a big picture, right? You got to remember too, Joseph Hooker's got 100,000 men in his front still. Now this is post Chancellorsville, right? When the pressure was on Lee to send men to Vicksburg, he's going to send Longstreet, but the pressure he's got Hooker right in his front, right? He's also got General Foster, right? Yeah. Foster is going to be going through North Carolina, so he's not too far away either. He's also got what's his name? He's got Dix. He's got BJDE, Big John Dix Energy coming down the peninsula, right? Who's going to threaten
like Sterling A.M. Wood?
Who's going to threaten him too? And also, don't forget too, you know, you're going to have that Kanawha Valley situation going on with Robert Milroy and Erastus Tyler. They're all coming together. They're all concentrating these big armies all around Richmond. So why the hell would Lee split his army up at that point? Now, in hindsight, we'll sit there and say, well, he probably should have to help defend Vicksburg. But who's to say he loses his entire, you know, his Longstreet's corps? He loses that first corps. You got Dix at the Richmond, coming down to Richmond. Yeah. You've got Tyler and Milroy in the Kanawha Valley, right? You've got all these things going on, and you got North Carolina too. There's so much danger all in that area that he couldn't give up any of his men. He couldn't. No. And he felt that his best defense was offense. So let's go back to the north again into Pennsylvania because we need supplies. If you read Lee's letters, he says point blank, our greatest enemy is not the Union. Our greatest enemy is lack of supplies. Yes. And that's exactly what he says. But there's so much. So the people rip on Lee for not sending troops over, and they say he was selfish. He should, you know, he didn't want to give up his men. Well, there's a reason for it. And when you get into the details and you see why, he doesn't have the 250-year 2020 hindsight that we have now.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, and there's gonna butcher the name again. Durant is saying that Longstreet is the best tactical commander, corps commander, and I mentioned that we are going to be having Ed Lowe's book on to talk about Longstreet in a couple of weeks on our book club. A Fine Opportunity Lost.
Right here.
Aaron has right there. Yeah, we're going to be doing that. The invites are actually going to go out in the next few days for that too.
No, it's not the best Longstreet battle. Not for nothing.
No, but it's
Finally,
an interesting point about Longstreet that doesn't get discussed a lot. And they also said, I'd argue his wounding at Wilderness, so Longstreet's, was more damning to Lee than Jackson at Chancellorsville.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Longstreet
no,
was really, really important to Lee, and I think like Jackson definitely gets overhyped, but he has his moments to have the swag, as Elsie says, but he isn't a winner overall. He is definitely like, you know, there is that cult of personality around him. But I do agree, like Claiborne was better than
no.
Jackson.
But you could say the same thing about Sherman.
Yep.
Sherman beat you psychologically more than physically.
Yep.
There's no more overrated offensive general than Sherman.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's true though. You want to talk about Chattanooga. You want to talk about Kennesaw Mountain.
Oh
You
yeah.
want to talk about
Tickets.
I'll pick it. Well, that's tough.
That's more Howard.
You can't really blame him for that. Wahatchee, you could certainly talk about, right?
Yep.
No, not Wahatchee, Chickasaw Bayou.
Chickasaw,
So
yeah.
so they all have. So he is more. Oh my God, Sherman's out there. He's coming.
Yeah.
Versus when you fought him,
It's like, oh.
well, no, it wasn't bad. It's just that Jackson was like that too. Jackson was fantastic strategically.
Yeah.
And his march that he did at Chancellorsville was brilliant. It certainly was. The Valley was a little bit different because he was kind of a little bit of a brat in the Valley, threatened to take his ball and go home a few times.
Yeah.
He did fight against the great Nathaniel Banks from Waltham, Asbury. So he had that benefit too, unfortunately, right?
Yeah. Oh, real quick, Tammy said, shout out to Ed Lowe. She's loving the book. That's awesome to hear.
No, Ed's actually how you and I met, years ago.
I know. Yeah, we met because of that, which is pretty awesome.
Because the Chickamauga Chattanooga roundtable years and years ago. He's a great guy. We met him. We went down to Chickamauga last year.
I love his wife. She is so sweet.
She's really, really cool. And he'll be on for a book club with a date, which of course I've since forgot about. I can tell you who fought where, but I can't tell you the date.
Same. I think it's Tuesday, April 16th. It's a Tuesday night.
You can look, but definitely come on for that though, because his book, A Fine Opportunity Lost. It's neat because I can't. I wish Bjorn always jumps on at the last minute, but I wish he was on now. But I can't think of too many books that talk about the East Tennessee campaign with Longstreet that culminates at the Battle of Knoxville. And you focus on a lot of things that took place. People think about that era. You're talking about Chattanooga, right? You're going to talk about Ringgold Gap. You're going to talk about all that stuff. But when you think about, and again, it's not Longstreet's greatest moment. So if you're going to come on thinking you're going to see Longstreet wearing a Superman outfit on this one, these aren't the droids you're looking for.
But I mean, you have to talk about the bad moments these guys had.
No, you do. Like, but he goes and he fights, and he fights Burnside, and Burnside has that really great defense where he pours the water down the sides and it makes it all slippery, and they're trying to Bugs Bunny it up the hill. The Confederates that can't get up with the ice, and Longstreet goes, you know what? I'm done. Let's go into winter quarters. The hell with this. I'm going back east. So he does get beat by Burnside, which is a thing. But the strategy, because if originally Claiborne was supposed to go up with him, and he got about halfway, and then Grant gets put in place. It replaces Rosecrans at Chattanooga.
Bragg was like, you have
and then
to go
Bragg
back. And Sherman said, Claiborne's like, Jesus.
Bragg says, "Oh fudge," but he didn't say fudge, right? And so he ends up having to recall Claiborne back, and Claiborne's literally halfway to Knoxville. So now, how does that change into this effect? How does the loss of Claiborne, who would have been Longstreet and Claiborne fighting together against Burnside? Now Claiborne's got to come back, and good that he did, because he was able to hold off Sherman.
Gap and Ridge.
He's going to change the battle plan now, because Sherman can't beat Claiborne.
Nope.
So Grant's like, well, let's try this Thomas guy, see if he has any luck.
And Thomas, he, of course, is like, yes.
And Thomas runs right through them and wins the Battle of Chattanooga. So all these things, that's cool about history. There's little changes here and there,
Oh yeah, there's some really great comments here. Elsie said by himself, Sherman was I would agree with that. It was his subordinates that really helped to make who he was, like Thomas.
Well, it was, but he had that Belichick thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Or that Joe Torre thing, right? Where like the teams were good, But if you knew you were playing a team coached by one of them, you were one strike on you already. It was that personality, that cult of personality we mentioned with guys like Jackson. And that's what Sherman had, where the perception versus reality is two different things. And this isn't ripping on Sherman because he was one of the best generals the U.S. had.
Yeah.
But he was not a type of guy. He loved to go hit your flank and get around you.
Yeah.
And it's why Joseph Johnson kept falling back and falling back and falling back. But if you can get Sherman to recklessly expose himself frontally, never a good sight. He always struggled. He just did. And Kennesaw Mountain is a perfect example of that, where Sherman said, I'm sick of bobbing and weaving. I'm going to hit this guy. And he got astroglided on the
Isn't
side
that
of
when
the mountain.
Thomas was like, oh no.
Yeah, he said, we can't. He goes, this, if anybody's been at Kennesaw Mountain, go to Cheatham Hill and you tell me that's a good place to fight if you're attacking.
I see why Thomas was like, oh no.
It's just not, though. It's just not.
Yep. And Durant said AJ Smith was another great general, and didn't he beat Forrest at Tupelo?
AJ Smith's the guy that's get a lot of credit too. You know who likes AJ Smith is what's his name from Ireland over there?
Colleen.
No.
Ryan.
Ryan. I don't blank his name.
He's from England.
That's right.
But he's Irish, but he's from England.
My ass kicked when I say that to him.
Yeah.
But he likes him. He likes Edwin Kirby too. But there are a lot of guys like that who are able to beat some of these big guys. I mean, Nathan Kimball was the only guy to beat Lee and Jackson in the Civil War in the same bout. No one studies Nathan Kimball.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And Frank said my favorite AJ Smith moment was when he got to Nashville in '64 and Thomas was said to bear hug him.
Well, Thomas had bigger problems in Nashville. I mean, he's thinking he's about to get his ass fired for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, because Grant's like, I can get him fired now.
And that's where the weather actually hurt him. It helped and hurt him because it kept Hood away from fighting in the snow, but it gave the impression that Thomas was being too lazy, didn't want to fight. Yeah, and he's about replaced by either Grant or by Jefferson C. Davis.
No, wasn't it Blackjack?
That was Blackjack. That's who it was.
Blackjack was on his way. And it's like Thomas is writing them saying, like, I can't do anything because of the weather. I can't. Ambrose says one general who seems hated everywhere but Kansas and Missouri is Alfred Pleasanton because he was in charge of the cavalry that drove out Price.
Well, we've said before, Alfred Pleasanton, two things. Most punchable face in the Civil War. We've said that, okay? Two, he is the most underrated disaster of a general. I mean, when you look, okay, just speaking to Gettysburg here real quick, okay, and he tries to claim credit for all Aldie, Middleburg, Upperville, all the cavalry going into that campaign. But when you look at the fact, if you look at East Cavalry Field, for example, right, Dave McMurtry Gregg is the reason why he won that. He really was. And you look at all the stuff that went down with Custer staying. Somehow, I mean, there were two taverns the night before with Kilpatrick and with Custer, and somehow Custer ends up on the Union right for some inexplicable reason and leaves Kilpatrick down on what will be South Cavalry Field with Farnsworth and all those guys later on. But he ends up staying, and he gets recalled to go on the other side with Kilpatrick. And Custer's like, well, we have Stuart here. Maybe I should stay here.
Yeah.
And he goes, I tell you what, if you order me to stay, I'll stay. And McMurtry's like, oh, you can stay. Yeah. So he stays, and he ends up fighting with those Michiganders, and they end up fighting to hold off Stuart. While Kilpatrick is literally peeing down his leg on the other side of the field. I mean, and you got some good guys in Wills, but you look at Farnsworth, what he pulled off down there, and that absolute foolishness with the 1st Alabama, the 15th Alabama, got his ass killed for no reason. So, but he is a very underrated incompetent in the American Civil War as Pleasanton. And if you really get into the weeds with him, and you study why the hell of all people is this guy in charge, he's one of those enigmas.
We've always said he has the most punchable face.
Well, that's what I said. But you can't quite understand why he is in charge of that. Now, he's got great division commanders. Buford is fantastic.
Yep.
He's got people like that. But then you got guys like Wesley Merritt, who's brand new. Kilpatrick was brand new. Custer was brand new. And he doesn't manage him well when he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
They won East Calvary Field really on in spite of Pleasanton.
Yeah.
Right now, Brinkerhoff Ridge is a good moment for him. He's able to keep the Stowall Brigade
Mm-hmm.
on Culp's away from Culp's Hill, which is good on him. But Run DMG, David McMurtry, Greg, he's the reason why they won that part of East Calvary Field. No
yeah,
question.
he's when you took Gentili and I out to East Calvary Field and gave that, like, we went on that little kind of talked about it. That was really, really cool. Gave me a greater appreciation for that part of the battlefield. Durain has a good point, and this is another reason why we do this podcast. And I love this comment for this reason. General who seems likable on a human level is Burnside. He had no ego, and he seemed to be blamed for the crater, which wasn't like his, like, not 100% his fault.
I mean, as much as I love to rip on Rhode Island for Andros Burnside, which
I do agree with the human part of it. He definitely seems more like just like a nice guy who's kind of not in the right place.
Yeah, I mean, but did he say he doesn't deserve credit for the crater?
No, he seemed to get blamed for the crater, which, I mean, the crater was like hit, like he was the one that was like, let's draw straws kind of thing.
That's the thing. If you're looking at the crater, Ambrose Burnside does everything right up until it's go time.
Yeah.
He digs the crater, he does that whole thing, and it's brilliant the way he does that. But when it comes time to attack, for whatever friggin' reason, he doesn't. He really has three good brigades and one shitty one. And the shitty one is Ledley. And he says, let's pick straws. And he pulls out the straws, and of course, Ledley gets it. And he ends up. So I would agree, but I think up until that point, the straw thing is really what people hit him on. Yes. Because I mean, I don't think it's going to change. I mean, but the problem with Burnside too and Ledley is he gives orders to the crater's going to blow up. You're going to run to the outside of it and you're going to fight there.
Yeah.
But Ledley, who's drunk and stays in the back, doesn't even come forward. He gets hammered drunk. Call me maybe situation, right? The men have no leadership. So now they're going into the crater, and it's these USCT guys, and it turns into one of the worst racial attacks in the Civil War. So yes and no. I would agree that he handled that well, but right when it came time for the kickoff, he inexplicably fell on his dick. And but that's okay. And that doesn't take away from the big picture, but it's tough to get around that if you really study the crater.
Burnside is a lot like John Bell Hood, that he's really great in a lower command where he has someone managing him, but then when you stick him in command of a whole army, it's like, oh, this is your win way over your head.
Burnside gets unfairly ripped at Fredericksburg. He does, okay? But and the thing about Burnside, you're coming off of Antietam, and you're the guy left in charge. You have the attack on the Burnside Bridge, and all that stuff, and he gets put in charge. He has a good plan at Fredericksburg. The problem with Fredericksburg is the friggin' pontoon boats get there late.
Halleck screws him over.
So he's like, we're going to get there and we're going to attack. We're going to get to Maurice Heights. We're going to hold the heights. The Confederates are slowly getting there. So we have to act quick. He orders the pontoons. And for some reason, they must have sent them in the U.S. Postal Service because they got there delayed, right? And by the time, and this is the thing too, is by the time the pontoons get there, Lee has already he's got Maurice Heights fortified, but he's already sort of mentally committed to Washington, who put him in charge because they want someone to attack, right? Someone and the perception was that McClellan's not going to attack. Yeah. So it's like Hood Atlanta. If you're put in charge with the understanding you're going to attack, you're going to attack.
You have to attack. Yeah.
So he attacks. I realize that everyone, Howard, Hancock, they're all telling him we shouldn't be doing this. This is probably stupid. Yeah. But he kind of had to do it, and he attacked. Ended up being a complete shit show. He doubles down on the Mud March, but in his defense, the Mud March, if it succeeded, was gonna basically he kind of did what later on what Hooker was gonna do, but he did it in the mud. And they get to Profanity Gulch, Mary, and they're all swearing, yelling into the valley. And,
that's my place,
right? But it's you can pick and choose with all these guys, but again, Burnside had the right plan, but it got delayed and it all got screwed up. So it's tough to completely rip on him. Now, you could sit there and say he probably should have known better to attack, but at that point, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Durant was saying that Burnside as a person was a good person. Like he's not one of these like ego, he's not really an egomaniac. And I mean, I like Burnside. I don't like him as a
you
general.
know who he is? Speaking of your baseball, he's Charlie Manuel. That's who he is. Remember Charlie Manuel? Uncle
Vague
Charlie.
Uncle
He was a
Charlie.
manager who everybody liked, a little, kind of not confrontational, wasn't really aggressive, was just there. Everyone liked him, patted him on the head. That's who Burnside really, really was. But he felt that he had to be aggressive. And
Yep.
but he was unnecessarily aggressive at the wrong time. And that's
Yes.
the problem. But again, the
And
communication.
unfortunately, his disasters that he had, like his bad parts, overshadowed the good parts because obviously Burnside does have good parts to get to where he was, just like John Bell Hood does. And I mean, Frank said, I wonder what Burnside did to owe AP Hill money. We're wondering
Well,
that.
that's the intrigue of this thing is that that's what's cool when you study the personal aspects of these things. Was AP Hill was going to go beat Burnside because he owes him $8,000, and,
Yeah.
and it's so funny that people sit there and say, well, that's not true, that didn't happen, but Burnside gave a spy $8,000 at Fredericksburg. It's just funny how the number is the same to scout out positions, heading outside of right along the Rappahannock.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating when you look at it. But I don't think Burnside is a bad general per se. I think he has his bad moments, but I think he gets unfairly blamed. I think
Yeah,
he was
and
put in a bad spot
I
at
think the
Fredericksburg.
human, like with any of this, the human aspect gets lost on this too. That the fact that some of these guys were probably, you look at from a human perspective, really, really interesting. Like
He didn't.
Burnside,
He didn't chicken out. He didn't chicken out. I mean, you could sit there and say, "Well, is he better than Hooker?" Well, Hooker is the one who really had Lee over a barrel with Chancellorsville and stopped and peed down his leg and stopped.
well, I mean, I might too if I had got hit in the head with a piece of friggin' wood.
No, that was before that though.
Oh, right.
That was the
But
whole Hooker lost confidence in Hooker thing.
yeah,
I mean, Burnside. I mean, he gets. I mean, unfortunately, historical memory shows him to be this bumbling fool at Fredericksburg. But when you look at the details, it's kind of. I mean, he had a great plan at Slaughter Pen Farm.
yeah.
That part of the battle, he did really well there. But there's people realize there's two sides of Fredericksburg.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
Marie's Heights, but that's not the only part of the battle.
Yeah, there's the part where Meade had broken through Jackson's guys, and he probably would have succeeded had that one been guy like, I don't take orders from you. And Meade's like,
I mean, yeah, but that's the thing too. You can find pluses and minuses to everybody, but I think if you can go back and you had the ability to cross Rappahannock earlier, and how that would, I mean, all would have happened was Lee would have fallen back somewhere between Fredericksburg and Richmond, and there would have been another battle somewhere along in between, somewhere along the way.
yeah,
But there wouldn't have been that mass casualty events on Marie's Heights,
yeah.
right? So he did get a lot of his men killed. He really, really did. Probably he fought. I mean, if you think about it, is there much of a difference between what Burnside did at Fredericksburg than what Hooker did at? I mean, that Hood did at Franklin. If you think about it,
No, it's
even
it's
the weather's the
pretty,
same.
it's very similar. And like the thing with Hood is like, I mean, I I can't find any redeeming qualities of him in command of the Army of Tennessee. I can when he's like corps and division and all that, he's very good, but he had someone kind of to rein him in a little bit. When he's put in charge, and I get it, like Davis wants someone to fight, but on that, Davis is also not there, just like Lincoln was not there to
Yeah.
understand the mood of the troops. And when Hood was put in charge, I don't think many in the Army of Tennessee were very, very happy about that. And if you're someone who studies Hood, you you got to see that. You got to see that he is
No,
not a good
there's definitely
commander.
people. There are people we know certainly who have blinders on with Hood, and I get that. And Burnside again, he's part of that parade of faces that all took place in the
Yeah.
army of northern of the Potomac.
Oh, yeah.
And he never should have got the position. I mean, he's the guy who, I don't want to say lied on the resume and got the job and was over his skis, but I mean, you're going from McClellan, who people want to rip on McClellan, but he was substantially better than Burnside. He just was. But Burnside's like, well, I better attack. I've got the men. I'm going to do it. The boss wants me to attack.
Yeah.
So, but he never should have been in that position. I think he did the best he could with his faculties, the whole
Yep.
deal. He just wasn't that guy. It's
No.
tough to blame him for doing it though, because he was put in charge. I mean,
Yep.
he was offered the position, he took it, but he felt the best. He did the best he could, but he hit that glass ceiling.
Yep.
But I mean, I think he would have been. History might have been a little bit different if he was able to get across the river early.
If he had been able to get the pontoons, and that's the thing. Is
but
like
this guy, but again, this guy was not U.S. Grant either.
No,
okay, he wasn't.
I mean, none of them were at that point. Well, there was like, what did I read somewhere? Someone said like early in the war they should have sent U.S. Grant. If U.S. Grant had been in charge, he would have like won the war at that point. And I was like, yeah, U.S. Grant was drunk in a tent at that point or something.
No, and that's the thing too, is this
1862 U.S. Grant is not 1864, 1865 U.S. Grant.
No, they all evolve, they all learn, they all get better, and they all are they're victims and heroes of their of the experiences. And that's anybody.
You have to look at it from a human perspective. Any of us, you know, if we're thrown into something, we might not be able to do it at a certain point in our lives. But then like later we are. Like 1862 Grant, like I said, is not 1864 Grant. He has to have those mistakes and victories that shape him in who he is. The same as like Patrick Cleburne at the Battle of Shiloh is not the Patrick Cleburne that we see a few years later.
And you got to look at the politics aspect of it too. I mean, speaking of Army of the Potomac, when Meade takes over, there's all that talk about how the Butterfield and Sickles and all this stuff. But when you look at the politics, Meade's a Democrat. Hancock's a Democrat. Sickles is a Democrat who loves Lincoln for some inexplicable reason, right? Reynolds is a Democrat.
He liked gossiping with Mary.
So you take over really a couple of days for the battle, and you've got half of your generals are on your side politically, but then you've got guys like Howard, right? You got these abolitionists, so you have to deal with this politics too. And as much as people want to talk about Sickles and Meade going at it, politically they weren't too far different. People forget the fact Reynolds was not an abolitionist by any stretch of imagination, and neither was Hancock. Hancock was a Democrat. So when you look at politics plays into all this stuff too. And that's why some guys got positions, some guys didn't get positions.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Just that there's the politics are playing into it as well. I mean, Howard has is that
part of the reason maybe Reynolds turned down Lincoln for the position? Because he didn't want to fight for the post-Emancipation Proclamation war. Who knows? I'm just saying, I have no idea. I'm nothing to base that on, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of stuff that goes in the background with this stuff that people don't always study. Right.
Yeah, exactly. MJ's popping off. Have a great weekend. Ghost said, like, at least Sickles seemed fun to hang with, a real dude. I agree. Partying with Sickles, that would have been fun.
Yeah, maybe to his subordinates probably. I mean, Sickles is a guy. People realize how smart Sickles was. He was the only one of the 7 who wasn't a West Point guy. So he didn't really fit. He was the outlier. He did screw up the supplies and slow the whole army down coming to Maryland. But again, Jim Hesser, our friend Jim, is a big, I don't want to say a proponent of Sickles, but he's more balanced.
He tells the story very well about Dan Sickles.
He tells the pluses and the minuses. Versus some people just sit there and say, Sickles bad, right? Where he's able to balance it off a little bit. So it's more of a fair 360 view. And that should be it. Really, anybody who studies any of these historical people, that's how people should study these people, right?
I agree.
I mean, we know people you mentioned before about Hood, people who see no flaws in Hood whatsoever, right?
Yes.
And that's fine. People who see no flaws in Lee or Jackson or Lincoln or any of these guys, Grant, pick one. Where they become so ingrained in hero worshiping or negative hating people that you kind of miss the forest, the trees. Sometimes the emperor doesn't have any clothes on. And I'm not saying that all these guys are frauds, but there's always a side to them.
Well, the flaws are interesting to look at because too, like, for example, I'm going to mention Oliver Otis Howard. It was a year ago yesterday we saw Ezra Church, which was like Howard's redemption after Chancellorsville, where he was in command of an army for the first time ever, very unsure of himself. That's evident in his memoirs, but he was able to beat SD Lee at that battle. And it was a horrific battle. I mean, I know SD Lee's not that good, but it was still, he put up a good fight with Howard. And I think studying the flaws of these guys, like what happened to Howard at Chancellorsville, it's clear he learned from it. Just like you study the flaws of any of them, and you see how they improve, how they learn from them. And some of them don't. I mean, some of them hit that glass ceiling, like Hood absolutely hit that glass ceiling.
Mhm.
And the thing that bothers me with some of the study of Hood is this whole, like, let's blame the subordinates when Hood does bad, but let's give Hood all the credit when he does good.
Yeah, and that's I mean that is what it is. I mean, but you're going to run into that with that any of these people. But look at it, the secret, of course, is always to be balanced. And you even you worship at the altar of Oliver Otis Howard,
I don't
but
worship.
but you to your credit, you'll pick out the foibles, you'll find the flaws, you'll find that
Oh yeah, he hated to be told what, like he didn't like to be wrong. He's like anybody, he doesn't like to be wrong, and he fully admitted that about himself. Um, he has a bad day at Chancellorsville. Absolutely, he does. He has other bad days in the Civil War, but he has good days too. Like
yeah.
he has a great day at Ezra. He's great on the March to the Sea. He's put in charge at Columbia because Sherman recognizes that they have to have someone in charge that is the adult in the room. And that's Howard. And he does, he in Reconstruction, I commend him for lasting as long as he does in the Freedmen's Bureau. And the thing about that is there's a lot of people that say Howard was corrupt in the Freedmen's Bureau. He he was to a point, but it was more so his subordinates that were corrupt too. And he trusted them and didn't realize what was happening.
No,
But
and
nobody looks at what what's his face, Fernando Wood is doing on the sidelines either, right?
well, that's the thing is people. I mean, no one studies Howard closer than you do, admittedly, right?
Mm.
And that's the whole thing too. And and you look at someone like a Hood, he's got a lot of
Oh
positives.
yeah, absolutely
And
he does.
I do think it's unfair to blame Hood for Spring Hill because I don't think
Mhm.
that's his fault. I think now you could sit there and say the buck stops here, all that stuff, of course, right?
Yeah,
But I think whatever happened, I don't think enough credit goes to Schofield for
no,
getting past him. Now you can make your case that you've got several of his subordinates saying that we shouldn't attack Franklin, and they did it. But again, if your goal is to make sure Schofield doesn't cross the Harpeth River and get back to Nashville, you have to attack him.
yeah,
And you're confident in your army. I wouldn't want to fight for a general who was not confident in the army.
yeah,
So it's tough to blame him for that too, despite the fact that maybe in hindsight you look back, you say, well, maybe it wasn't the best idea. Maybe they should have gone around the flank and
yeah,
all kinds of stuff. But again, that's why we study history.
yeah.
There's no right or wrong. This is not
And
math.
there's no
Okay.
stupid opinions.
Right. You have to be able to look at it and make up, you read as much as you can, you read as many sources as you can, you make up your own opinion, and you keep your mind malleable. So keep it so you are adaptable to change. You don't close your mind to a lot of this stuff because we know people who study who all these people, especially on social media, who they hold on to that point of stubbornness of grim death, and they're not going to let it go. And this is for north, south, east, west. It doesn't matter who the
Yeah,
hell you support. Um, but if new stuff is going to come out, if some new primary source came out tomorrow that blew the cover off of one of these guys,
yeah,
there are people who wouldn't believe it because
yes,
they don't want to think that all I've learned in my life might be wrong. And that's the
yeah.
problem.
It's like the primary source materials that came out about Slocum a few years ago that have really turned the tide on how we see him at Gettysburg. And there's people that are like, no, Slocum sucked at Gettysburg. And look, Bjorn's on here now.
We were talking about Bjorn. We were talking about you a
Hey,
little while ago,
Bjorn.
Bjorn. Thanks for jumping on.
He
He's
did a really good Facebook Live yesterday. I watched it from the podcast about some books related to Shiloh, and he was
right.
talking about there was a book about Nathan Bedford Forrest. There was also a book, it's called a biography of Beauregard as we call him, but it's actually more of a memoir because all the author does is like, and Beauregard said this and proceeds to quote him and stuff. But he had some really cool stuff that is available to get from the Abraham Lincoln Bookshop, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. No, so yeah, we were talking about Bjorn. The reason I was talking about you a little while ago was we're going to have Ed Lowe on. I know you know Ed Lowe, who wrote that book, A Fine Opportunity Lost, about the Battle of East Tennessee, the campaign. And we're trying to know if there's any other books besides Ed's that have been written about that East Tennessee campaign specifically. That's not part of the Chattanooga campaign, leading the Battle of Knoxville. I couldn't think one off the top of my head, so I'm sure you don't know this. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm sure this you can find that out. But we're gonna have Ed on as part of our book club, and he and it's I think Ed's great. He's a colonel in the military, but he's also somebody who has done a lot of study in that Chickamauga, Chattanooga area, and so this is a fresh new type of unfertile ground, at least for me anyway, on a book. So hopefully I'm sure you know more, but this one I think is gonna be a good read.
Yeah, Bjorn just mentioned the book. He called him Beauregard. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It said Alfred Roman's Military Operations of General Beauregard. That was when I heard you talking about that yesterday. I'm like, once I'm done grad school, I need to find a copy of that book, and like, I really want to read that because that sounds so. Beauregard is like one general who I love to study. He's so cool. He's so interesting. Ghost of Sickles Lake said go BC.
Big game against the meat chicken on Thursday.
Said BC and U of M.
BC.
Okay, Earl Hess wrote a book about the siege in Knoxville, but I think there needs to be a lot more study on the war in East Tennessee. I would agree with that.
I would agree. Also, BC is going to kill Michigan. On paper, it's a mismatch. So hopefully they should roll.
Well, Ghost of Sickles Legs.
They should beat Michigan. Michigan's not that good, but they're playing well though. Could be a good game, but I think Ed's book is going to be really, really good. I mean, the discussion will be really, really good because it's tough to find. I mean, we've seen so many books on Lincoln and so many books on Grant, so many books on Sherman, and so many books on Lee. I mean, to give him credit, this is his sweet spot. Is this East Tennessee? I mean,
good for him. Like, I admire anybody because I mean, one of my things I'm going to do when I'm done grad school is finally write a biography of Howard. And that's my goal. That's my big goal in life, is to update the biography that was written in the 50s or 60s, which is still a great biography, but it doesn't talk a lot about the Civil War portion of it. Jerain asked, do you know of any good books on Lee's first campaign in West Virginia?
I would say The Man Who Would Not Be Washington. That book we talked about before. There's probably other books specifically on the West Virginia campaign back when it was Western Virginia, but that book, I forget the title of who wrote it. Not John Betschloss. I forget, but it was called The Man Who Would Not Be Washington. It was about Robert E. Lee, comparison to him with George Washington on the Confederacy, and really the first quarter of the book is really on his West Virginia, and that's the bet. There's probably more books specifically on the whole thing, but that was the one I read that gave me the most enlightenment to that part of the campaign. And it's specifically his early days, because his early days were not good, right? I mean, he got one of George Washington's relatives killed, in the mountains up there, and so. But there's probably specific ones, but I love that one. I think that's a great book.
Frank says that's such a cool goal. We'll be rooting for you. Thank you. Yeah, it's that's my goal.
Yeah, I better get credit for that. I better get some sort of mention.
You're my co-author, so it's
about that. But there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good readings about these different things. But I'm looking forward to this book club. I hope a lot of people come on. Ed is not he's not one of these guys who's a scholar type. He's not a professor anywhere. He's a regular dude who writes, and he knows his stuff. But there's a lot of good stuff. But it was but I think this is a good one, definitely.
Yes, it definitely is. I'm looking forward to having him on because, again, Knoxville doesn't get talked about a lot. It's funny, in Howard's memoirs, he mentions that Sherman made a mistake in his. So Sherman said that someone else went with him to Knoxville, and Howard's like, I can assure you it was me. It was me. And he gets it wrong.
The other book that's actually a pretty good book about West Virginia is the Wittenberg book that Eric wrote.
Yes.
I forget the title of it right now. But that one that one's a really, really good one. If you're going to read about the formation of West Virginia, I think the Wittenberg book is the absolute best that's come out.
Yep.
But there's other books you can buy that claim to be blowing the lid off of the history.
Bjorn mentions the one that you're talking about, the Fifth Border State. He hasn't read it yet.
Spoiler alert: it doesn't. fair warning on that one. That book is just rehash Wittenberg stuff. The Wittenberg book is a better one. There's no there's no new history coming out in that latest book you're talking about. But there's a lot. But that's another part of the war that doesn't get studied enough because. But that's how it is. That's reality.
And Durant mentions, I think Mead could use a good biography. So I typed in the chat, I said for Mead, check out Searching for George Gordon Mead by Tom Huntington. Great author. He wrote a book called Maine Roads to Gettysburg. We had him on our book club last year. He's a great guy. And then Mead at Gettysburg by Kent Masterson Brown.
Yeah, there's a lot of good books on Mead. Mead at Gettysburg is what's great about Mead at Gettysburg is it really does a great job leading up to the beginning of the battle. Mm-hmm. Ken Masterson Brown wrote the best book on the retreat from Gettysburg. And so if you take those books as bookends, mm-hmm. the Mead at Gettysburg leads you into the battle, and then the other book leads you out of the battle. Everyone knows the battle, the middle. You can read your Fonz and Coddington and all that stuff. But the lead up in the post-battle, Brown nails. Absolutely nails.
Yep. And the other one too, I was going to mention since we have Bjorn on here and it's also the anniversary of Shiloh, is there's the new biography about Albert Sidney Johnson by Tim Smith called The Iron Dice of Battle. And I know for sure he has it at the bookstore because I bought a copy from there for you for Christmas.
That's right.
So, have a great day, Ghost. Ghost of Sickles Leg, who is cheering for BC. Is
Ghost of Sickles Leg. I love that
name.
Awesome. Go BC. Go BC.
But yeah, the Iron Dice of Battle is a new biography by Tim Smith about Albert Sidney Johnson. So that's pretty cool. And Tim Smith is a great guy.
Tim is he's one of those dudes.
He was so fun to hang with on our book club.
He was put on Earth to talk about that part of the battle, to talk about the Western Theater. Vicksburg. That's why he's that dude. He just is. So
I love his comment about they needed like a Pemberton bobblehead at the Vicksburg Visitor Center because what's his face? The cavalry guy was making him basically like look at
Benjamin Grierson. He had Grierson was, you want to talk in his head. Ben Grierson was Jez Pemberton's head. Yeah. And we talked before about how Lee didn't send those troops over because of what we talked about with everything going on. But if he did reinforce Joseph E. Johnson, right. They could have attacked the Union from the east, from Jackson. How that went, but again, there's so much when you look at the Civil War at this era. There's so many moving parts. It's a whack-a-mole game. If you take troops away and send them over, you're weakening yourself. There was no way Lee was going to weaken his army. No. In the spring of '63, there was too much going on in the area. There just was. He did finally send Longstreet's people over, as the Union sent the 11th and 12th Corps over. But again, if he did that before Gettysburg, I mean, it would have been a disaster. Lee was smart to know that he had to keep his men, and he needed supplies. He had to go into Pennsylvania. He had no choice but to do it. And a lot of the anti-Lee people hit him on that for being selfish and holding on to his men. But really, that was a smart play.
I get why he had to. Miranda mentions Tim is fun to hang with in person as well. I could totally see that. He was such a nice guy.
Oh, he's a good Southern accent. Good. He's fun. He was one of the better ones we had on here. As far as the overall, just because he was like, he reminded me a lot when we had Kent Masterson Brown on, where you talk to these people and you've got to double take and realize these guys weren't there, but that's how Eric
Scheinlein was in his book, Black Iron Mercy, which I encourage anybody who wants a good historical fiction to read about. It's Gettysburg, but good historical fiction. Black Iron Mercy by Eric Scheinlein. Oh my God, it is so good. I like it more than Killer Angels. The way he writes like he was there.
Well, that's the thing is you can sit there and go, wait a second. It's like when you weren't but just if you're a good presenter and you can tell a good story, you can almost just imagine what it'd be like. That's exactly what it was like, and that's how they all are.
Eric's a great dude too. He's like a retired firefighter he lives in Wisconsin. Fun to hang with. Like we just hung out with him on here, but he's fun to hang with too.
No, and that's the thing too, and you can talk to people about the whole, they should have done this, they should have done that. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's pretty cool to talk about about some of the stuff and how some of the movements might have played out. And Bragg would have loved to have Longstreet. He would love to, and it just, even though Longstreet became a pain in his ass later on.
Well, Longstreet went out there, and Durant says Longstreet's plan to unite his corps with Johnson's army with Bragg and attack Rosecrans.
It was a great
smart move.
It was a smart move, but you're robbing Peter to pay Paul if you're doing that, because if, like we said before, you've got Dix in the peninsula, you've got Kanawha Valley, you've got Milroy doing his thing with Erastus Tyler. There are so many. If you take a third of your army away, you're going to get hit and you're going to get pounded. So Lee had to keep them all together. But yeah, in hindsight, if he would have taken that course, sent them out there, it would have been a great move for the West, but a significant cost to the East. So I mean, so what are you going to do? You sacrifice one for the other. But it's fun to talk about, though.
Oh, it is, and I mean, Longstreet going out to the Western Theater was Longstreet like, I'm going to get an army. I'm going to be in charge.
If you like Longstreet in the West, you definitely want to jump onto the book club we've been talking about with Ed, because he's going to talk a lot about that. And
I'm just going to double check the date on that, because I'm going to send the invites out this weekend for it. So it is Tuesday, April 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern via Zoom is our next book club, and we're going to be talking A Fine Opportunity Lost by Ed Lowe. Even if you have not read the book, you are welcome to join us. And you know what? If you come away from it and you want to read the book, that's awesome. We open our book club up to everybody to come to it, even if you're not finished the book, don't worry. If you finished it, great. If not, don't worry.
All right, so as we wind down here, it's almost that time. It's almost 12. So the stuff that's coming. So we're going to be doing our episode this week on Island Number 10.
Yep.
Speaking of the Western Theater, right, and that whole thing, Mississippi, that whole thing. Actually, we're going to record that this week, and then we're going to be doing an episode where we'll be joined by Dr. Alan Gelzo. He'll be joining us to talk about Voices from Gettysburg, his new book that's coming out at the end of May or Memorial Day. He'll be jumping on with us to talk about Gettysburg. And then we'll be doing some stuff later on that we talk about Manhunt with Dave Taylor. So I'm looking. We have a lot of cool stuff coming. So and we'll do an episode of Lou Wallace. So we got Island Number 10. We'll be joined by Gelzo to talk about his new Gettysburg book that's coming out in spring, and then we're going to be talking specifically about Lou Wallace, and we'll be talking about the Lincoln assassination manhunt, dissect and analyze the Apple TV series, Mary. On Dave that whole thing. So
Bill Hammond says, not a Longstreet fan, so I need some balanced teaching on him. Well, you should read Elizabeth Varon's book.
Yeah, Elizabeth Varon's book that just recently came out is probably, in my opinion, the best balanced book on Longstreet. And there's the Lee Longstreet thing that goes back and forth, and it's like the weather, it changes. But if you read his situation and read it's mostly his post-war, he's a fascinating study. So definitely check that out. And Dr. Liz is really, really cool. She's a good friend of the podcast too. So, all right. So why don't we jump off, get ready to go here. I don't know if you heard just now, but Shane Bieber, Mary, is out for the year with a Tommy John surgery. So your Indians just sustained a substantial kick in the nuts for the rest of the season. They just announced that just now. So he's broken. So sucks to be you.
And everybody just saw my reaction to that real time where I was like,
yeah, that's a tough one. Wow, that's a tough one. So Shane Bieber, we hardly knew you. We'll see you on the Red Sox next year, free agent. So, all right. So off we go. Any final words from you, Fitzgerald?
Thanks for everybody for being here. Frank said, looking forward to the book club. Always glad to have you join us, Frank. He said, it's been a tough week and I appreciate you all for the great conversations. Well, great to have you on here. Love when Frank comes on here, because when Frank comes on here, he always announces what anniversary it is. And I love that because it kind of jogs your memory and gets us talking about something. So that's
hopefully things are better, Frank. Remember, Frank, you've survived 100% of every bad thing that's ever happened to you. Never forget that.
Frank's a cool guy.
Frank is a good guy. Cool. He dressed in the hottest looking clothes in Gettysburg last July.
But he was cool.
And I cannot believe he walked Pickett's Charge like he was dressed up for wintertime. He didn't sweat. I'll never forget that. Anyway, so off we go. So let's jump off, guys. Have a great rest of the week. We'll talk soon. We'll schedule this next live. I'm not sure when we're going to do this next live.
I think we're probably going to do an evening live because next weekend and the weekend after we're busy. We're actually going to Canada in a couple of weeks to go see my family that lives there. and we're gonna actually go see a Confederate monument in Canada. So we will be posting pictures of that. Bjorn said Frank is indeed a great guy. Yeah,
Frank is a good dude. Frank and I
so
have gone to the book. We've met Bjorn at the bookstore,
Yep.
and you haven't.
No, I haven't. I've seen Bjorn in person.
So Frank and
Or not in person, but I saw it in the video. So
no, it's a great. Definitely go check that out. All right, guys, off we go. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you all on the other side.
yes, see you guys later.